What's up, everybody? Tom Pelissero here with Judd Zulgad once again. It's Friday, Judd. The injury report out, and the only significant thing, Aaron Henderson sitting out this game, which, as you said, who would have thought a couple of years ago we'd be talking about Aaron Henderson as a significant loss, but outside that play last week, he's played pretty well against the run, and here they are facing a 49ers team that runs the ball awfully well.
Well, and Tom, the problem, too, is depth, right? I mean, I think we said through training camp, if these guys have injuries at certain position or position groups, depth is a real issue. Linebackers certainly among them. Marvin Mitchell will get the start. Here's the X factor. The most interesting thing to me, though, it's not Mitchell starting. It's Jasper Brinkley now being in the nickel. So passing downs will be Brinkley and Greenway. What did we talk about all training camp? Can Brinkley do this in the base defense? Now we're talking about him being in on every passing down. That is the biggest thing with Henderson being out, is Brinkley being in on passing downs to me.
Well, we talked about this a week ago, too. We were always looking at this being the game where the Vikings would really be tested in terms of how are they going to handle tight ends here. Can Aaron Henderson deal with a guy like Vernon Davis running the seam? All of a sudden now it's Jasper Brinkley, who really, his history doesn't suggest that he's going to be somebody who's going to be able to make those deep drops. Right. I wonder if that'll affect some of the play calling here, too. How much are you actually going to play Tampa, too? There's adjustments you can make knowing what Jasper Brinkley is. I don't think that they want him covering the deep middle a lot, but you're going to have to do it some. There's middle reads in every defense.
Do you think, though, realistically, I mean, Vernon Davis is a bad or a tough matchup for these guys with Aaron Henderson in there, Tom. Do you think realistically they have any shot? If the Niners say, because they're certainly going to sit there and say, all right, game plan-wise, we already were going to use Vernon Davis a lot. We might use him more now. Do you see any way that the Vikings can contain him? Because go back to what? 2009, when the Vikings are very good. Third game of the season, same game, parallel situation as far as the games. Niners are down, I think, by 14 points. They come in here. That's the Brett Favre game where he throws to Greg Lewis. Well, they did that because Vernon Davis had a huge day and San Francisco rallied. So do you see any way that the Vikings have a chance, given their current linebacker situation, to contain Davis?
Well, it's going to be a tough matchup regardless because he's one of the best tight ends in the game because he's so fast for his side. This doesn't help, though. No. Aaron Henderson drops a lot better than Jasper Brinkley does, and my theory coming in was they were going to try to isolate the Vikings in their base defense and isolate Jasper Brinkley against Vernon Davis. I'll be interested to see, do they use their safeties differently here, too, because we saw some things through camp, through the preseason. Mr. Raymond and to a lesser extent Harrison Smith coming down and matching up one-on-one with guys at the line of scrimmage. I think we might see a little bit more of that. Now, do you want guys playing man-to-man defense all over the place? I don't think you do. I think that we've already seen them get burned on that a few times. You got to mix in some of those coverages, though. And I would probably take a guy who at least can run with Vernon Davis and might not be able to muscle up on him versus a guy who's not going to be able to run with him and probably can't muscle up on him.
So what you're saying is as far as the Tampa 2 goes, we might see it some, but not as much, which would make some sense. And the Vikings have talked about this too. They don't use Tampa 2 all the time. I mean, that's a term that we use as their base defense that we think about. That makes sense to me. Here's the weird story too. How about the fact that Aaron Henderson gets hurt in the fourth quarter on Sunday, okay? He comes out, I think on Monday, Les Frazier said he thought it was an elbow. Monday, they don't know he has a concussion. Tuesday, they don't know. Wednesday, he comes out for practice, according to Frazier, and he starts to have some symptoms of a concussion. And they send him in for a test. It's weird because the league has been so paranoid about concussions and getting guys off the field that this guy, it took them basically, 3.5 days to realize he had a concussion.
Well, and what I find strange about it is if you watched on Sunday, when Henderson first comes off the field, I looked across and I tweeted it. I said it looks as though the head athletic trainer and the other trainers are checking him for a concussion because that's what they were initially doing. You can tell that when a guy comes over to the sideline because they'll have the notepad out. The guy will be sitting there. They won't actually be touching his body. They'll be going through a series of questions or whatever it is and trying to determine whether or not he's okay. And there was a doctor there too. All of a sudden, Frazier comes out and says it was an elbow injury. I don't know if that was a matter of Frazier perhaps having him confused with Brian Robinson. Maybe he hurt his elbow on the play too. They definitely were looking at him as though he might have a concussion. He came back into the game, which is exactly what the NFL doesn't want to have happen. So maybe this was a case where they got a little bit further down the line here and all of a sudden those concussion symptoms started coming on. That's not unprecedented. I've heard of that before, but they definitely looked at him and they must have felt as though it wasn't a concussion. Now all of a sudden on Wednesday it comes out and that gives them very little time because you need, generally speaking, at least 72 hours to go through all the protocol because they need to give you the test on several consecutive days.
Yeah, it's a weird story, and certainly if the team thought it might be a concussion and then they thought, well, it might not be or he's not hurt that bad, they put him back in, they're going to have to cover themselves a little bit here. But nonetheless, it's just weird to have the head coach say, Monday seemed fine, Tuesday seemed fine, and Wednesday he seemed concussed. Because this league, I mean, how much have we heard in the last 2 years? You know, if a guy's hurt, if a guy has a concussion, he's out. So it's a little bit odd.
Offensively, it'll be really interesting to see how they combat that 49ers defense because that front seven's so good. Their two inside linebackers are really good. They don't play that much in their base defense. They play a lot of 2-deep coverage, which the Vikings are going to look at and probably say it's going to be tough to hit big plays against these guys. But early on in the game, if you're the 49ers, you probably are stopping. You're probably not fearing it. Nobody's fearing it. The Colts didn't fear it. They were playing sort of a cover 2, but out of a set where there was a safety down in the box.
Right.
I think we'll see more of that. I don't know. You never have to take shots. Everyone who says, well, they just got to try throwing the ball downfield. If no one's open, that really doesn't do you any good because all it does is open you up for turnovers. But I think if they think that they can get the 49ers in the look that they want, they will try to throw the football down the field because they've got to be able to do something to open things up in the middle. It's going to be tough enough to run on these guys with 7 in the box, much less 8.
Here's a scary thing. The Niners have basically stopped Green Bay and Detroit on the run with 6 or 7 men standard up.
Well, those teams can't run the ball anyway, but yes.
Right. But my point is, okay, these guys can. There's nothing to stop the 49ers from bringing 8 or 9 guys up. And just telling the Vikings, hey, if you can go deep, good for you. The only thing I can think of, and you might totally disagree with me, the only theory that I can come up with that might loosen things up is Jarius Wright plays, right? Mm-hmm. Jarius Wright comes back, doesn't get a ton of snaps. You get him on the field with Harvin together, and at times the downfield shot goes to Harvin.
Well, that's what you need to be able to do.
That's the only thing
you need to come up with some sort of a way to balance the speed on the perimeter. That's what we always talk about. And until Simpson's back, you're probably not going to have that. We saw a little bit of Wright in that final preseason game against Houston.
Yes.
You saw the speed. He's a 4'4" guy, but he's undersized. Is he an ideal outside receiver? Probably not. I don't think he's really a split end. He's more of a slot guy. They don't have one, but that's one more guy you can test. I want to see now, can they get the tight ends more involved out of some of those 2 tight sets? Because they used Kyle Rudolph. In the first game, they sort of spread him around. They played him some in the backfield, some detached from formation, some in line. In the last game, they played him a lot in line. They had him blocking more in that game, too. Can you hit some of those things? If you're playing 2 safeties deep, in theory, one of the spots you should be able to take advantage of is the deep middle. So do you run Rudolph up there? Can you get Carlson open in those spots as well? And can Ponder take some shots there? We'll see. I will never be a proponent of throwing the ball to a guy who's covered unless it's somebody who you are 100% confident is going to win most of those balls. Sidney Rice, even a Kyle Rudolph at times in certain spots against certain sorts of players, but Rudolph doesn't get a ton of separation.
I agree with you on the tight ends, though. We've been waiting now for Bill Musgrave in this offense to utilize the tight ends like we thought they would.
And they think they're better personnel-wise than they were a year ago.
Right, which is fine, but once again, paging John Carlson. Please pick up the red phone because you've been targeted once in 2 games.
18 snaps in the last game. It's tough to get into a mix.
Most
of those snaps were run snaps, too.
And he did get hurt, but my point is you signed him to a 5-year, $25 million deal with, what, $9 million guaranteed? You got to get contributions.
I've watched him run, though, before games. He's not running like he was before, and I think that's part of it. He's got the brace off now, which I'm sure is helping him out, but until he's really going at full tilt, is that guy going to get open? The thing is, he's never been a guy either that you want to detach a ton and have him run in a bunch of stuff against man coverage. He's somebody, though, who has a good feel for getting into the zones, has pretty good hands and all that. Well, so you don't have anybody. You still have nobody. This is the running theme with the Vikings offense. You don't have people who can beat one-on-ones.
Can you imagine next week coming off this game when the Vikings are most likely 1-2, the coverage we're going to give Jerome Simpson? That is going to be the story.
You'll be hailed. There'll be palm fronds on the ground for him, I'm pretty sure.
Lance Allworth, Jerry Rice, James Lofton, Art Monk, all combined. That's what we're going to make.
He has vertical speed. He has a dominant trait. That's the one thing he can do. He's Judd. I'm Tom. Full Vikings coverage at 1500ESPN.com, including the picks out tomorrow in the preview, because Judd doesn't want to give us up right now.
Sort of do, but that's okay.
See ya.